Ukraine of today, like the western part of Ukraine today, was under Polish rule. The Cossacks that were on the eastern part of the Ukraine of today, near the river Don, they were fighting with the Poles all the time, whoever was more powerful. And in the beginning of the 17th century, 1600 something, during the time of a Tsar called Boris Godunov, the Poles invaded Russia with a pretender to the throne who was actually an impostor. And so there were battles and war, and then eventually they just went back. So the Russians never liked them, and at the end of the 18th century, under Catherine the Great in Russia and Frederick the First of Prussia, they divided Poland. They conquered it, and the western part of Poland went to Germany, to Prussia. The eastern part went to Russia and was a part of the Tsar's empire, And then I don't remember now whether they managed to do it a second time. And they definitely did it a third time in 1939, when Hitler invaded Poland and had an agreement with Stalin at that time, a pact with Stalin, and they divided Poland. The eastern part went to Stalin, western part to Hitler, till June of 1941, when Hitler invaded Russia. So I have an idea about Poland. Mm-hmm. But there were times, when Poland was a very powerful and important kingdom. And it happened also that due to the intermarriage of royal families, there were kings of Poland that were kings of Hungary also, and vice versa. King of Hungary was king of Poland. And in the 17th century, when the most famous Turkish Sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent, managed to invade, they already had Hungary under their administration, but invaded Austria, and they were stopped right at the wall of Vienna. And then the Europeans really allied themselves with the Austrians, and also the Germans and others came to help the Austrians to fend off the Turks, because they didn't want the Turks should expand the rest of Europe. And the person they put in charge of that particular war was the King of Poland, was Sobieski. And he was the one that grandmastered, the defense of Vienna and stopped the Turks. And actually they were beaten there well enough so they had to retreat. And then after that they lost gradually Hungary, and they just stopped at the border of whatever is Serbia, Yugoslavia of today. Mm-hmm. Little note of European history. Yeah, and that was a time when Poland was very important, during the time of Sobieski. Mm. So it was 1670 or something like that.
So you know so much history.
I know, it's amazing.
They were my fairy tales, Right. I started reading fairy tales when I was, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years old, and when I was 9 years old, I read the Greek-Roman mythology, and the very interesting stories. And then, when I was 12 years old, I just went to the public library. They had these books of history. They were that big, and world history and all. And I read it just like fairy tales. And
but you read it again.
What?
You read it again, because otherwise, how do you remember it from the time you were 9?
Oh, I can remember things way back.
Gene has a fantastic memory.
Well, I don't know whether it's fantastic. The point
he
is
has.
that you remember really things that perhaps interested you at that time, you know, certain point or something that interests you at that time, and you just remember. It's automatic. It didn't have to work because I read them once. I didn't read them twice or three or so, you know. I read them once. I just remembered it.
You know, Gene was studying medicine like reading a
I read
novel.
it once too. Yeah,
You
I
know,
didn't read
it
it
was
more.
when we got married. We had one room at the psychiatric
Yeah, in the
institute.
neurology department.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, we had one room and the bathroom. That's what we had. In the room, we had one bed, and it wasn't a big bed. It was pretty
No, it
small.
was big enough.
Big enough for us
Yeah.
to. And then the other piece of furniture was a desk, a lamp, and a chair. I don't think we had anything
Yeah.
else. And now there was a problem, you know, after we got married. Gene, before we got married, he was using the desk and the chair.
No, not always.
But,
No.
well, I don't know, but I said to Jean, I cannot use the bed because I will fall asleep. I cannot study in a very comfortable lying down. So I said, I take the desk with a hard chair, because it was a pretty hard chair, you know. And then he took the bed, and he was studying in the bed. But you know, he was reading the big anatomy book and others like a novel.
Yeah.
He retained everything.
Yeah, I
Now,
read it only once,
I
you
needed
know.
to read more than once to retain it. See?
Yeah.
And so we were every night, we studied until midnight. That was so to prepare for the next day. And and then he was reading in bed, and he didn't get sleepy. So at close to 12, I was getting sleepy, so I realized I have to go to bed. And then I took my big anatomy book, which was like this big. And then I learned, you know, that the bones, the study of the bones and the femur, a big femur, you know, to find the insertions on them. And I went to bed with a big anatomy book and with a femur. And she
It
was
was reading,
watching
and I
me.
was watching her
Was watching
because she was falling asleep, and I didn't want that it should fall on her face. But she fell asleep.
But I wanted to study the last minute, you know, and Jean never fell asleep, you know, sitting
Yeah.
in bed, I wouldn't be able to study.
Yeah.
And he read it once. He has a fantastic memory. He has
No,
a
I
good
didn't have a
photographic
fantastic,
memory.
no.
Jean has.
No, not photographic.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, because you read
Oh,
all
I have a
those books.
really good memory.
Like a
you know.
novel.
I still have, but
Right.
I could not
the
do
thing
that.
is that
Yeah, you know, I have a good memory, but I
that you
could not
retain the things
read
that you are
once and I
interested
retain
in, you
it.
know.
Yeah, I had to
Things
read more.
that matter to you for one reason or the other, you know.
Well, I
And
read a lot.
sometimes I remember the years automatically.
Oh, Jean?
You know, I never studied the history of England, for instance, you know. But
Jean, everything he reads,
but,
he retains.
in our system in school, in high school, when we learned the world history, we learned also the history of England, and you know how the original people were called Britons, and then you had the Celts that came there, and then the Angles and the Saxons and so forth. And then finally the Normans invaded Britain. And in the year 1065, they vanquished the local population. King Harold died. So I remember that. You see, I didn't have to work for that.